In the Mafia, family means everything. But what happens when two brothers, born of the same blood, walk two very different paths to the underworld? John Carneglia, a trusted member of the Bergin crew, close to John Gotti linked to the Castellano hit that changed the face of the Mafia, and Charles Carneglia, a violent enforcer known for dissolving bodies in acid, battling demons, and ultimately betrayed by the very kid he once took off the streets. This is a story of two men who helped shape the Gambino family's most violent era. One walked out of prison, the other will never walk free again. Let's get into it. Ozone Park, Queens, the heart of Gambino territory. It wasn't just another New York neighborhood. It was a pipeline into the Mafia. And for the Carneglia family, that pipeline ran right through their bloodline. John and Charles Carneglia, sons of Carmine and Mildred Carneglia, grew up in the shadow of Bob royalty. John was born on May 21st, 1945, while younger brother Charles was 1 year younger, born on August 10th, 1946. Out of the 6 boys who were born to Carmine and Mildred, only John and Charles went into the life. Their neighborhood was Ozone Park, and that was Bergin Hunt and Fish territory, the headquarters of the Carmine Fatico crew, and the place where many young men got introduced to the life. John, the older brother, was quiet. He watched, he learned, and soon he was running errands and making money for John Gotti and Angelo Ruggiero, trusted allies of a man who was rising fast, John Gotti. John Carneglia's reputation grew out of a place called the Carneglia Junkyard, a Mafia multi-purpose hub where money was laundered, bodies were buried, and stolen cars got chopped. Charles, he is different, unpredictable, temperamental, known to dabble in dope, prone to fits of rage, and later capable of sickening violence. While John climbed up the ranks as a trusted earner, Charles floated around the edges. He'd run with his brother's crew, sure, but he wasn't made, not yet. Too reckless, too much heat, two brothers, same roots, same neighborhood, but their paths were already splitting. One was headed towards respect in the upper echelons of the Gambinos, the other towards blood-soaked vengeance, addiction, and acid barrels. If you're from Ozone Park and looking to move up in the Gambino family, there's one place to be, the Bergin Hunt and Fish Club. And this just wasn't a clubhouse. This was the command post for the Fatico crew, and by the mid-1970s, it was actually John Gotti's crew, and the breeding ground for the family's future leadership. And John Carneglia was right in the mix. Early on, he participated in the crew's staple rackets, truck hijackings, fencing stolen goods, and enforcing the crew's will through violence. He also developed tight bonds with John Gotti's inner circle, in particular, Gotti's brother John Gotti and their mutual friend Angelo Ruggiero. And together, this trio would venture into the lucrative but dangerous business of heroin trafficking. And by the late 1970s, law enforcement believed that Carneglia was heavily involved in a large-scale narcotics distribution network alongside John Gotti and Angelo Ruggiero. John Carneglia, he wasn't flashy, he wasn't loud, he just got things done. He earned respect and built trust, and behind the scenes he moved weight, lots of it. Carneglia's years of loyalty and criminal productivity paid off when he was formally inducted as a made man in the Gambino crime family. Sources indicate that he got made by the late 70s, around 1979, during a wave of inductions authorized by boss Paul Castellano. His induction was sponsored by Angelo Ruggiero. At the time of Carneglia's making, the Gambino family was split between the Neil Delacroce wing, to which Gotti, Ruggiero, and their crew belonged, and the Castellano faction. Carneglia's induction, presided over by underboss Neil Delacroce, who conducted ceremonies for his faction's recruits, solidified his standing. He became a soldier in the Gambino family, officially, and assigned to Angelo Ruggiero's crew. By the early 1980s, Carneglia was neck-deep in the heroin pipeline, and this was causing problems. The boss of the Gambino family, Paul Castellano, had a rule against narcotics, but the Bergin crew kept dealing and kept raking in millions. And for a while, Paul would overlook it because of the envelopes. It was a risky move, but the money was just too good. And for Gotti and his inner circle, John, Gene, and Angelo, it was a bond sealed with blood and dope. Meanwhile, Charles Carneglia was doing heavy work. He wasn't officially made yet, but his role was clear. He was muscle, executioner, and cleanup crew. Bodies disappeared, cars were crushed, If you crossed the crew, you might end up in a barrel full of acid. While Charles was feared, John was trusted. He was Gotti's go-to guy, dependable, stone cold, and deeply loyal. And when the day came to take out Paul Castellano, John Carneglia was right there, finger on the trigger. December 16, 1985, Spark Steakhouse, Midtown Manhattan. John Carneglia is perhaps most notorious for his role in one of the most pitiable mafia hits of the 20th century, the December 16, 1985 assassination of Gambino boss Paul Castellano. Tensions had been mounting for months between Castellano and the Gotti-led Bergin crew. The primary catalyst was the federal indictment of Angelo Ruggiero, Gene Gotti, John Carneglia, and others on heroin trafficking charges, a direct violation of Castellano's edict against narcotics and a development that made Castellano view them as a deadly threat. Facing potential prison time and fearing Castellano would move against them first, Gotti secretly organized a plot to eliminate Big Paul and seize control of the family. Carneglia was brought into the conspiracy as a trusted soldier ready to do the wet work. On the late afternoon of December 16, 1985, Castellano and his underboss Thomas Bellotti arrived in Manhattan for a meeting, unaware that hit teams were lying in wait outside Spark Steakhouse. John Carneglia was one of the gunmen, stationed near the restaurant's entrance along with Eddie Lino. As Castellano exited his car, he was ambushed in a hail of gunfire. Carneglia is believed to have delivered the coup de grace, firing the fatal shots to Castellano's head. A simultaneous volley of bullets killed Bellotti in the driver's seat. Backup shooters Dominic Pizzonia, Angelo Ruggiero, and Anthony Tony Roach Rampino was positioned down the block in case Castellano's bodyguards intervened. Across the street, John Gotti and Sandy the Bull Gravano watched the assassination unfold from a parked car, ensuring their decrees were carried out. The hit was brutal and brazen, carried out during rush hour in Midtown Manhattan in the Christmas time. But it was successful. Paul Castellano lay dead on the pavement, and by mob law, the leadership of the family fell to whoever the captains would vote in, and that would be John Gotti. Carneglia's role in the Castellano murder was indispensable in paving the way for Gotti's rise to boss. According to later testimony, Carneglia was indeed identified as one of the shooters. Government informant Sammy Gravano would later flatly accuse Johnny Carnegs of being the trigger man who put 2 bullets in Castellano's head. And an eyewitness in Gotti's 1992 trial also picked out Carneglia as one of the gunmen he saw at the scene. Notably, despite this evidence, John Carneglia was never formally charged for the Castellano-Bellotti murders. After Gotti's regime fell, prosecutors chose not to indict Carneglia for the hit, as he's already serving a long prison sentence on other charges. Nevertheless, his role in that infamous December hit is firmly embedded in Mafia history, making him as one of Gotti's key assassins who violently reshaped the Gambino family's leadership. Regarding Charles, he didn't do anything quiet. He did blood, fear, and chaos. As Gotti rose through the ranks, becoming boss of the Bergin Hunt and Fish Club crew, the Bergin crew, and later head of the family, the Carneglia brothers were part of his inner circle. Charles, in particular, gained a reputation as a ready and ruthless enforcer for Gotti, and together with his brother, he started out working for Carmine Fatico's crew, performing whatever tasks were asked of him. He had no qualms about using violence. Indeed, mob turncoats later testified that Carneglia was regarded as a stone-cold killer by his peers. Whenever Gotti needed muscle for a job, Charles was eager to volunteer his services. During this early period as an associate, Carneglia became involved in a spectrum of organized crime activities. He was implicated in truck hijackings, theft rings, and extortion rackets typical of the Gambino crew. Notably, the Carneglia junkyard became a hub for crime. It facilitated large-scale heroin distribution, part of the notorious drug operation run by Gene Gotti and John Carneglia, and handled stolen cars, all under Mafia protection. Law enforcement later described the junkyard as a bloody mob chop shop, a place where illegal business and murder secrets intersected. Through these endeavors, Charles earned money for the family, though unlike some mobsters, he never developed a major illicit business of his own. What truly distinguished Charles and the Gambino crew was his propensity for violence, and by the late 70s, he had already demonstrated his usefulness as an enforcer. For example, in 1979, when John Gotti's daughter Victoria was physically abused by her then boyfriend, future mobster Carmine Agnello, Gotti dispatched Charles and his brother on a mission of retaliation. And according to later testimony, the brothers joined mob associate Peter Zuccaro in hunting down Agnello. And when they found him, John Carneglia shot Agnello in the buttocks, and we all ran up and beat him down with axe handles, Zuccaro recounted. Gotti's instructions had been to slaughter Carmine, beat him severely but not kill him, and Charles eagerly took part in carrying out that order. This incident exemplified how Charles was introduced to mob work. He earned his keep by inflicting violence on behalf of his superiors, enforcing the family's rules through blood when necessary. And throughout the late 70s and early 1980s, Charles was involved in numerous crimes on behalf of the Gambino family, and these ranged from loan sharking and gambling enforcement to acting as hired muscle in internal family disputes. He was particularly known for participating in murders and heavy-handed assaults. During this era, he operated largely with impunity. Gambino leadership valued his fearlessness, and witnesses to his crimes were often too terrified to come forward. FBI officials later note that Carneglia became part of the inner circle of the men used by the late boss John Gotti to commit numerous depraved acts of violence. His willingness to do the family's dirty work, coupled with his brother's statue in the organization, cemented Charles Carneglia's position as a trusted but dangerous Gambino associate. And despite his many contributions to the Mafia's agenda, Charles remained an associate for a long time. Unlike his brother John, who had been inducted earlier thanks to his significant role in Gambino drug rackets, Charles in the 1980s was still technically an outsider in the eyes of La Cosa Nostra hierarchy. He nevertheless was a feared presence on the street. Paul Castellano was wary of Charles because of his reputation for volatile behavior and substance abuse. However, by 1985, Gotti was the new boss. In Charles Carneglia's body count, it reads like a mob horror story. In 1976, he killed Albert Gelb, a decorated court official who made the mistake of agreeing to testify against Charles. Albert was found behind the wheel of his car with 4 bullets to the chest and face at 1:30 in the morning. In 1977, Michael Cotillo, a Gambino associate, was stabbed in broad daylight. In 1980, he's tied to the acid dissolution murder of John Favara, the man who accidentally killed Gotti's son. Informants have stated that Favara was taken to the Carneglia junkyard, where Carneglia got rid of the body in his favorite way possible, through a vat of acid. In 1983, Salvatore Puma, another Gambino associate that crossed up Charles, was stabbed to death. And in 1990, Jose Delgado Rivera, an armored truck guard, was shot and killed by Charles in a robbery at JFK Airport. However, and most importantly, Charles was given an on-the-record contract in 1990 to take out Louis De Bono, who was a Gambino soldier. De Bono's crime? He ignored John Gotti's orders and paid for it. On October 4th, 1990, in the parking garage of the World Trade Center, the hit team found De Bono in his car. Charles Carneglia pulled the trigger, and doing so, earned his button. That was his making ceremony. Not a ceremony at all, but a message. You serve the family in blood, and the family makes you one of their own. 2 brothers. One moved like a shadow, pulling triggers for power. The other, a butcher known for using acid to make bodies disappear literally. You see, Charles kept barrels of acid at the family's junkyard, and according to multiple informants, he dissolved bones, teeth, and flesh to make bodies vanish. Some say he enjoyed it. So while John was earning millions in heroin deals with Gene Gotti, Charles was knee-deep in blood, lie, and chaos. Together, John and Gene were running one of the Gambino family's biggest heroin rings. But in 1989, the feds finally caught up. John and Gene were convicted of heroin trafficking and were sentenced to 50 years. John took it like a soldier. Never flipped, never whined. He went to federal prison and stayed solid. Charles, he kept working, kept killing, kept sliding deeper into the darkness. They called him Kevin McMahon, a street kid, a drifter, someone with nothing until the Carneglia brothers brought him in. He was like a son to Charles and John. Ran small-time work, helped around the junkyard, a kid trying to survive. It's rumored that he was the one who provided the mini bike that killed John Gotti's son, Frankie. Until he saw what the Carneglia brothers were really doing. Kevin saw it all. He knew who Charles was, what he was capable of, and when the feds came knocking, he flipped. In 2008, as part of Operation O-Bridge, McMahon gave the FBI everything, details of murders, loan sharking, extortion, and the acid barrel stories that sounded like urban legend until he confirmed them. Charles Carneglia, the feared mob killer, was now betrayed by the kid he took off the street. But the betrayal didn't end there, because Charles wasn't just a victim. He knew how to turn on people, too. In the 1990s, Charles allegedly plotted with John Alite to assassinate John Gotti Jr. And it was allegedly for abandoning the old guard. Charles, by this time, was older, and honestly, his style was not appreciated by the younger mobsters. That move, plotting against the Gotti name, that told everyone Charles was unhinged, out of step, dangerous even to his own. With McMahon's testimony along with tapes, informant tips, and old murder files, the feds locked the case tight. Charles was charged in 5 murders, including Louis DeBono, Albert Gelb, and Michael Cotillo. Albert Gelb, even though the judge said that he committed that murder, he was not convicted of the murder of Albert Gelb, but he was convicted of the other 4 murders. Each murder was sealed with informant details, surveillance, or sheer brutality. Charles sat in court with a beard looking like a ghost, not the feared killer from the 1980s, just a relic, abandoned by time, and betrayed by the kid he once fed. By 2008, both Carneglia brothers were off the streets, but their fates couldn't have been more different. John Carneglia had already served close to 2 decades for heroin trafficking with Gene Gotti. He stayed solid, never flipped, never broke. And in 2018, John was quietly released after nearly 30 years inside. No press conference, no victory lap. Just a man walking out of prison, still loyal to the oath he took. Charles Carneglia, he wasn't so lucky. With McMahon's testimony, tapes, and decades of violent history on the record, Charles was convicted of racketeering, multiple murders, and extortion. He was sentenced to life in prison, no possibility of release, and he took that ride alone. No allies left, no one to back him, not even the family. He'll die behind bars. One brother walked out, the other was buried alive. And just like that, the Carneglia legacy, the feared name once whispered in the corners of the Gambino family, was reduced to 2 outcomes: freedom bought by silence and life lost in noise. But the story doesn't end there, because legacy always lingers. John and Charles Carneglia were brothers by blood, but forged by very different instinct. One rose through loyalty, silence, and calculation, and the other through violence, chaos, and fear. They served the same crew, ran the same streets, buried the same enemies, but in the end, they buried each other's legacy. John kept his mouth shut, did his time, and walked out a relic of the old world. Charles, he chased a legacy of blood. In return, he got betrayed by the kid he once fed and locked away forever. The Gambino family survived wars, rats, wiretaps, and bloodshed. But like the Carneglia brothers, that's where the soul of the Mafia lives. Not in headlines, not in movies, but in the twisted paths of men who thought the streets would protect them forever. Their story is more than mob history. It's a warning that in Cosa Nostra, blood may make you family, but it won't keep you safe. What are your thoughts on the Carneglia brothers? What is their legacy in that life? I'd love to hear your comments. Thanks for watching, my friends. If you appreciate the content I'm putting out, please hit the like button and also consider subscribing to the channel. We have more real mob stories coming out soon. Until next time, take care, stay safe, and God bless you always.